Hello, hello. Pay attention to the armor numbers here. This is the North Carolina. It has 305 millimeters of armor on the waterline and slightly above it. Now we go to today's ship, which I'll be featuring, the Iowa, and we notice that it's 307 and 297, whereas the NC was 305 and 305. So slightly above the waterline, the Iowa has very slightly better armor, and at the waterline it has the same or a slightly worse armor than the NC. So almost the same stats in for all practical purposes. In fact, if you notice the front there, the NC actually has better armor thickness at the front. The Iowa has less at the front, which might be the reason for this weird plunging citadels punching through there. But overall, it's practically the same armor, and this is going to be a theme in this commentary. Anyway, let's move on to the commentary itself. Right, as I was saying, I will be featuring this, in my opinion, very nice looking ship, the Iowa, the T9 US battleship. Now, that thing that I just showed with the armor is actually quite a common theme. Basically, you have very much the same things, even sometimes slightly better, sometimes worse than the NC. But the problem is, of course, that you're against T9 matchmaking all the time, which means you will face, well, significantly higher caliber guns, better DDs, better everything. It's rougher in general. Now, if you saw there, I briefly showed off, I'm running the Concealment Build on the Iowa, which gives me 12.2 km stealth, which makes it quite a stealthy battleship. In fact, I quite enjoy this stealth build in general. I liked it on the NC and I like it on this ship. Now, regarding the 3 million upgrade, I tried both the reload module and I tried the less dispersion module, and ultimately for this stealth build, the less dispersion module is, in my opinion, superior, because the whole idea, of course, with running the stealth build, which I like on battleships, is that you open fire from stealth, you surprise the opponent, they don't expect you to be there, they don't expect you to be in the position you are. I noticed there's an Omni division against me. Anyway, the whole idea with stealth build is, of course, that you get close, you open up from surprise, and you get in a huge volley before they even know you are there. That's the idea behind it. So, of course, having faster reload doesn't really help there, because once you've shot once, well, the surprise is ruined and they're gonna angle, turn away, and so forth. So having less dispersion and hopefully getting the maximum potential out of your initial volley is the goal here. So hence why my reasoning for running the less dispersion module, even though its actual effects can be somewhat argued. Here's a good example, of course. I'm waiting patiently for this Friedrich de Grosse. I expect him to turn soon. He has to turn soon. I got briefly plane spotted. He might have seen me, I don't know. But I'm expecting him to start turning soon, which is of course what I'm waiting for. German battleships, while you cannot citadel them, you can of course do significant damage to them regardless. Anyway, the accuracy is actually slightly worse than the NC. That was a pretty decent volley. The thing with the Iowa is that it has a sigma of 1.9. Now, sigma, for those who don't know the values, the higher sigma you have, the better. It stands for your vertical dispersion. So the less sigma you have, let's say the New Mexico has a 1.5 sigma, which is absolute garbage. So your vertical dispersion is terrible. And then if you have a really good one, for example, the most accurate IGN battleship, the Yamato, has a sigma of 2.1. So the Iowa has a sigma of 1.9, whereas the NC has one of 2.0. So it's definitely people saying that they feel like they're less accurate guns. Well, it's certainly true, because, well, it's right there in the files. You do have less accurate guns. But once again with the stealth build and the less dispersion, you can still get these effective volleys. You see I disappear into stealth between every shot, and that's what I like, because I can turn around and stuff like that, which is of course quite risky to do in this ship, because, well, you saw the armor. You have the same armor as the NC, and anyone who's played the NC know that it's not an especially tanky battleship, especially when you show broadside. And of course, the bigger issue is that when you move from the NC to the Iowa, is that your ship gets a lot bigger. It gets absolutely massive, in fact, and your turning circle takes a huge leap. The NC has very, very good handling. It has a turning circle of 760 meters. Well, the Iowa, on the other hand, has a turning circle of 920. So for those who don't want to count it out, that's more than a 20% increase in turning circle. So feeling like the Iowa is extremely sluggish compared to the NC, well, it's not a placebo effect, it's very much true. It has significantly worse handling. Of course, it gains this nice amount of speed, but ultimately in a battleship you usually want the handling more than you want the speed. So you have the same armor, but you're a bigger ship with worse handling. So there are times when you get punished really hard in the ship where there are situations where you feel you could have made a turn or made something happen in the NC, but in the Iowa you get punished for it. So it's actually taken me surprisingly long to adapt, because I really love the NC, but I can't say I really felt the same for the Iowa. It does feel clunkier. Now, there's of course also the Rudder Shift. If you don't run the Rudder Shift module, and before you have the C hull, which is very expensive, costs 60k XP on top of getting the B hull, of course. I don't have it yet here. In fact, I don't have the range upgrade, and I don't have the C hull. So my Rudder Shift is 25.6 seconds, which has made me often consider actually using the Rudder Shift module. In fact, it might be a very valid thing to be running. So handles kind of like a brick in every possible way. It feels more like the Friedrich der Grosse than it feels like anything else. Now, there's this, of course, handling issue also adds up to another issue, which is of course the anti-air. Now the NC has god tier anti-air. The Iowa has slightly better, but really not that much better. The long-range anti-air doesn't actually gain at all, it's exactly the same, but you do gain some on your mid-range, which is by default, I can't remember the default value, but with AFT you buff it up to like 5 km, so it does see a fair amount of use. You do gain a bit of a boost in that AA, but the biggest problem here is that the boost you gain is nowhere near to the boost carriers gain at the same time. The power spike a carrier gains between T8 and T9 is basically 2 tiers worth. I've mentioned this before, but the thing is, when carriers hit T9, they can get a module which increases their attack plane HP by 15%, which is pretty much the same as they gain from going up a tier. So what happens is that they go up from T8 to T9 planes, which is 1 tier gain, and then they slot the module, which is another tier gain. So that's why a lot of T9 AA in general feels very, very lacking. And this Iowa, while it gains over the NC, in slight amounts, it doesn't gain nearly enough to feel as strong against planes as the NC does, even when it has better AA. The reason it's not a fault of the ship, it's more that carriers get such a significant power boost from that one leap, and that's what makes once again the Iowa feel less satisfying. You don't feel like the plane terror. In fact, if a T9 carrier focuses you, well, you'll get killed. And because of the sluggish rudder shift and all this, it's even harder to dodge torpedoes. So you feel weaker against planes, which isn't really the fault of the AA. It's more that everything else scales better than you do. Now, another thing I might mention, since I've recently covered the Izumo, is that, well, I can show you here when I shoot. When he shoots at me angled like this, he can actually punish me and do some significant damage. When I shoot at him, well, he bounces it. Well, I don't even know where most of my shells went there. But in the past, the Iowa was considered far superior to the Izumo. In fact, I was of the same opinion. Of course, the Izumo was in quite a bad state for a long time. Mediocre state. It was never really terrible, but because it's a battleship with 410mm guns, so you can't really be terrible when you have that. But it wasn't really that competitive. But with all the buffs and with all the buffs and changes, and especially the amount of superstructure. So he shot me right in the superstructure and almost did 10k damage. And that's of course one of the things that you have so much superstructure, whereas the Izumo does not. So he has a harder time in situations, he has an easier time in situations like this to just blast you while you struggle to do damage to him. In fact, I opt to not even bother shooting at him, because I'm gonna just shoot at the Bismarck that's spamming HE at me from range instead, because he's giving more broadside. So, in the past, I would have said that I was far superior, but looking at my stats and basically feeling how both of these ships handle, I would say they are pretty equal. I would say they have pretty much equalized these days, which is of course a good thing for balance. So the Izumo is no longer bastard stepchild, basically. Gonna see if I can hit that superstructure. Yeah, see, he has so little superstructure. That's the issue. I'm trying to hit that, and no damage, just bounces. That's kind of my thing. He has a lot easier time. Anyone who's shot an eye, well, you can just look at my ship down here. You see how much stuff there is to shoot at, and that's also one of the things that kind of balance the tables between the Izuma and the Aiva. Of course, with all these Royal Navy cruisers and all these different spammers being added to the game, that benefit a lot from shooting superstructure. The Izuma, not having any, has a pretty nice advantage in that area. Now, moving on, since this is of course regarding the Aiva, you see my positioning that I'm trying to keep. Well, I don't want to push any further since there's Tirpitz and a Yamato pushing down from the right flank. You see, I've been trying to keep a position where I am roughly a bit away, basically a bit more than 12 km away from my opponents. The plan here is obviously that I can slip into stealth between shots, as I'm doing here. So I can take my pot shot from stealth, and by the time they realize where I am, where they aim and so forth, I've already like relocated a bit, changed my course and so forth, and in between shells I will disappear back into stealth, of course. That's the idea. So that's how I recommend playing this in general. In the beginning I was far too aggressive. I played too aggressive in the ship. Like I tried to get away with things that I could get away with the NC, but having a 760 meter turning circle against the 921, especially with this rudder shift, means that you're not going to get away with the same things you got away with the NC. Of course, the difference in matchmaking also means that, well, you're gonna, when you face T8s, you're lucky, whereas in the NC, if you're lucky, you're facing T6s. So once again, that also has an impact on why the ship feels weaker, while it generally isn't that much weaker, because I mean, it does still have the gunpowder. You saw that 16k volley just with my front guns. It's not like it doesn't pack a punch. It just the NC kind of spoils current USBB players, because it really is a fantastic ship. In fact, it didn't used to be that fantastic, but the buffs have made it a very, very good ship. And well, I've been gushing about that ship quite a bit because I've really, really enjoyed it. And in fact, it's one of the ships that I've kept on my main account. I rarely keep T8s. Like, there are a few T8s I keep. I think it's been like Benson, Bismarck, and now NC that are the T8s that I've actually kept. So it's been spoiled us a bit. So moving on to this Iowa is of course a bit of a struggle. Key note with the Iowa is very much like with the NC, you want to keep angled. You want to keep angled at all times. You don't want to be showing any broadside. This thing has a big citadel and it's easy to hit, and it has the same armor as the NC, which means it can't really stand up to any of these battleships. Yamato gave me broadside, so I punished him. Sadly only one citadel, but hey, it's a Yamato, I'll take it. This game is looking quite hard now. One of the main reasons this game is starting to fall apart now is the Chapayev and Iowa behind me, instead of focusing on the battleships in front of us and trying to focus on B to get the capture point, they are running off into the enemy base to chase the Fubuki. And well, if I was that Fubuki, I would kind of be giggling at this point, because why are these idiots chasing me? Well, sorry to be rude, but honestly, if you're chasing a DD in a BB and you're doing, it's one thing if you're doing it in a capture point and you're trying to force him out of the capture point to take it, but if you're chasing him into the enemy base, well, then he's bringing you way out of position. Once again, I focus on keep angled to the Yamato and the potential Tirpitz on the left. I mostly focus on the Yamato because the Tirpitz seems to be hiding behind the island. And at this point, I want to do as much damage to this guy before he angles and realizes, oh, this guy is actually wrecking me. And I hope the Yamato down there survives, because the longer he stays alive, the longer I can do damage to this dude. Now it seems like the Yamato has realized, oh shit, this guy is actually doing a lot of damage to me, and he's starting to angle. And that means, well, my damage potential just dropped to 0. This is of course one of the huge advantages of the Yamato. The angled armor means that he will bounce anything I shoot, whereas his guns can straight up pen me for massive amounts of damage without caring. And as well, you saw the front armor there, he'll overmatch me and blast me right into the citadel from the front if I give him a full front side. So yeah, this game is very much collapsing at this point. You see that Chapayev and Io is still running around in the enemy base. so that's a loss. I'm being flanked now, I have to deal with the Ibuki so I don't get torped. I should be able to take him out. But now the Tirpitz is popping out as well, and the Yamato shooting me, and that was quite a short ending to that game. But I did get to show the basic gameplay that I've been using in the Aiva to some pretty good success so far. Now the game ended in, not surprisingly, our defeat after this. I did do 192k damage, which considering I was against T10 is always pretty nice. But this was sadly a loss. This Mayhem managed to top the scores, and well, if you're T7 and you top the scores when we have Hindenburgs and Shimakases, then you get my compliments, because that just tells me how unimpressively my team has played. Anyway, looking at the detailed report, I did tank a fair amount of damage, but it was mostly, once again, mostly AP that did the huge hits to me, and that's kind of been a thing in this ship. It's a lot of big AP hits that kind of cripple you, not as much HE spam as I am used to in battleships. That's because, well, the armor really isn't enough. It does feel a bit squishy. Anyway, let's move on to the build. Right, as usual, I will start with the modules. Now, the first thing you need to get is the B-hull, absolutely. It gives you a bit of AA, but mostly it gives you 11k HP, which is certainly nothing to sneeze at. Once you have that, get the engine upgrade, buffs your speeds significantly. And finally, try to start saving up for the sea hull, which I still don't have, but it would give me a nice Rudder Shift boost, which I really need. Range mod, I don't really know if you need it, because your AP shell speed is so slow, 762 meters per second, that trying to hit something at that range, well, it's going to be more luck than anything else. I recommend premium repair and heal as usual, of course. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod 1, the AA range, absolutely, you don't need the gun range. And finally, if you run the stealth build I do, I recommend the reduced dispersion. Absolutely the reduced dispersion for, well, reasons that I explained. Damage control system, damage control 2. Now here, once again, especially before getting the sea hull, running steering gears mod 2 wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea at all, because once again this thing handles quite like a brick, especially before getting that hull upgrade. So don't take that as set in stone. In fact, feel free to experiment a bit yourself and see which one you prefer. And finally, of course, the stealth module, aka concealment system for the stealth build. Captain perks wise, basics of survivability, expert marksman, superintendent, AFT, and finally, of course, concealment expert to get that stealth down to 12.2. The last 3 points, especially for the Montana, would be of course saving into vigilance for that torpedo acquisition, especially when you no longer handle that quickly. It's really nice to see those torps coming. Anyway, that was my IO commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.